My name is Juliana Nykolaiszyn. With me is Tanya Finchum. Today is Monday, July 28th, 2014, and we're in Jet, Oklahoma, interviewing Jerry and Connie LaGrow along with their son, Jeffrey. This is part of our Oklahoma Centennial Farm Families Oral History Project. Thank you, y'all, for joining me today. So happy to be here. Jerry, let's begin with you. Could you tell us a little bit about your family and how they came to Oklahoma?
Well, my granddad came to Oklahoma, as far as I know, from Iowa, and settled in this area, and he bought this farm that we live on in 1908. And lived here for several years from that time on.
And do you know why he picked this particular piece of land?
No, I really don't. He bought a piece of land just west of here, a mile, and built a house on it, a brick house that still stands. And my grandmother, from what I heard, didn't like the house. So he sold that place and bought this one in 1908. And then they remodeled the house that was here.
So was he already married when he moved here?
Yes.
Okay, and how did he meet your grandmother?
That I really don't know. I think they were married before, well, I know they were married before they came down here.
Okay. And his occupation?
My grandfather's occupation?
Mm-hmm.
My grandfather carried the mail and farmed and built barns. And my father did a lot of the farm work while my grandfather did these other things. My grandfather farmed too, but my dad did a lot of the farm work while Granddad carried the mail and built barns.
Well, when your grandfather came here in 1908, outside of the house on the property, was there anything else on the land at that time?
Yes, the barn. My dad says that red barn was built in 1905, and since I built new doors for it and put colored tin on it and tried to preserve that barn. This building behind the house was here. It was had a row of windows all the way around it. We've kind of remodeled it. We've used it for several things. When our kids were home, we kind of we had a pool table. Well, we still have a pool table out there. Had a pool table, and we gutted the inside and redid it and put a pool table out there and a ping pong table, and kids hung out there a lot and played pool and ping pong. And then my wife, for a short while, had a preschool, and she had it out there after the kids left home, and now made it into an office. And the pool table's still there, but the only time it gets played on is at Christmas time. But
we have 5 grandsons.
And this little garage, it was out there, I think, when they bought the farm. And there were some other buildings. There's still one other building besides those 3 that was here, and we've used it for several things. It was originally an old wooden granary, and then when the kids, Jeff and our daughter Penny, had hog projects for 4-H and FFA, and we made it into a farrowing barn, and now it's just full of junk.
And the windmills.
Windmills. That's an original windmill. It's the only 3-legged windmill that I've ever seen. And that windmill, I think, is the same windmill that's in that original picture there on the wall.
In terms of ponds and water source?
We haven't got any ponds on this place. We have 2 wells that were not hooked up to real water. the original well out there, I have recased it with plastic casing inside the old steel casing, but it's been there. It was there from when my grandfather bought the place. That well was. We have drilled another well. I say we did. My grandfather drilled another well, and so we've got a water system in both of them. I've got it where if one goes down, I can put it all on everything. And the way it's hooked up now, the outbuildings and the stock tanks all go from one well, and the house goes to the other well. But if one of them goes down, I've got it where I can hook the whole thing on either well.
And then a cave.
And then the
Cellar.
cave is, I think my grandfather built that cave after they moved here.
Tell me about it.
Well, it's, we go down in it in the storm cave. It's a storm cellar. When we built this house in 1970, we built it so that the cave is under the patio cover, so we can get out the back door and get in the cave. So we kind of positioned the house around the cave.
Would your grandmother do much canning?
Yes, when we moved here, after I graduated from college in '59, we moved back here and started the farm. My folks at that time then bought a house in Cherokee and moved to Cherokee. And the cellar was full of old rotten canned fruit. And we loaded all that up and hauled it to the Cherokee City dump. But it was stuff that was probably 20, 30 years old in those jars down there. So, but you pick up a jar of peaches and it was nothing but mush inside of it. So she canned a lot, yes. And my mother also canned a lot.
Do you have any idea of the early crops raised on the farm at that time?
Mainly wheat. I can remember my grandfather and Dad cutting wheat when I was just a little kid, and it was mainly wheat they raised.
Mm-hmm. And then livestock?
Livestock, mainly cattle. I don't think there was any livestock on the place except horses and cattle. Of course, back in early days they farmed with the horses, and they had the horses and they had cattle. I don't think there was anything on the place except those draft horses and cattle until our kids got old enough to have 4-H and FFA projects, and then we had hogs and sheep around too. So at that time, but then after they graduated and left home, why the hogs and sheep went too. So we run a cow herd, 50 cow herd.
Chickens. Mother had chickens.
We had, yes, a lot of chickens. We don't, but my folks and grandparents both had a lot of chickens.
Your grandparents, how many children did they have?
2, my father and my dad's sister.
Okay. And were both interested in continuing on with the farm operation?
Just my dad.
Mm-hmm.
My dad's sister married Jim Lickerball, and he coached at Jet for a while, and then in I think about 1930 they moved to Oklahoma City, and they never did farm.
So tell me a little bit about your father growing up on the farm.
Well, I think my father did most of the farm work, and when he was young, and I think he kind of got burned out on it, and then he was ready to give it up. Certainly, when I graduated from college, I didn't have any problem. He was ready to give the farm work up. In fact, he didn't want to give up being the boss, kind of, but he wanted to give the work up.
How did he meet your mother?
My mother, there was a mile east of here, there was a country school called the Chicago Schoolhouse. And at that time, I understand that you could teach with this 2 years of college. And she had gone over to Northwestern, and then she got the job of teaching down here at this Chicago Schoolhouse. And she rented a room here from my grandparents. And that's how she met my dad.
And your father, where did he go to school when he was growing up?
To that same Chicago school, but he only went through the 8th grade.
Okay. And then what did he end up doing?
Well, he was doing the farm work.
Okay. So he just was a full-time farmer at that
Yes.
point, helping out on the family farm.
Yes.
Okay. And then how many children did your father have with your mother?
One.
Just you?
Just me.
You're it.
I'm it, yeah.
Lucky you.
Yeah. Yeah, I was the only child.
And where did you grow up?
I grew up a mile west of here on a farm that my granddad had bought. Then when my granddad died in 53, I think,
You were in high school.
or 53, I believe. And then my grandmother lived here not very long after that until she moved to Cherokee. And then we moved from that farm a mile west over here and lived here and they lived here till I graduated from college. And then they bought a house in Cherokee and we moved here.
Well, let's back up a little bit and talk about your younger days, helping out on the farm. Tell me about some of your chores.
Well, I was driving a tractor probably from the time I was probably in about the 4th or 5th grade, and did a lot of the field work from that point on. And we had a few cows that we milked, and a tornado came through in 1947 and blew, I'm talking about the farm a mile west where I grew up. Tornado came through in 47, blew the barn down, blew the windmill down, and Dad sold the cows. And then finally we put a windmill back up by the time that I wanted to get some livestock of my own, and put the windmill back up, and we didn't have much of a barn left, but at that point I started out with a cow herd.
We still have that door, don't we?
Yeah.
The door,
Yeah.
we got a door to the barn.
I started out with a cow herd when I was a freshman in high school as an FFA project.
And would you ever come and help Grandma and Grandpa on the farm? Their farm?
Well, yeah, some, but mainly I started to farm myself as an FFA project, and I cut my first wheat crop in 1952 as an FFA project when I was a freshman in high school. And and then I kept taking over a little more of the land and a little more of the land all the time, so I was kind of farming for myself.
Your hands were full.
Yeah, yeah. That's how I sent myself to college. Was I'd come home on weekends and run night and day on the tractor, and then Sunday late go back to Stillwater, and that's how I sent myself to college, was farming wheat. And we had a cow herd. Dad took care of our cows while we got married when I was between my.
That was after my freshman year.
Okay, between my
1957.
sophomore and junior year. I guess we spent 2 years in Stillwater married, and so we'd come home on Friday as soon as my classes were over, and I'd practically run the tractor night and day trying to get the farm work done after school started, and so I was kind of farming for myself.
And is that what you kind of intended, the direction you wanted to take your career?
Yes, my major, when I graduated from college, my major is in accounting. And so after I came back, I got a job with a law firm working income tax for their clients, and that was a winter job. And I still, I did that for 48 years. And I haven't done that now. I think 2006 was the last year that I did that. And that provided some extra off the farm income and gave me a full-time winter job.
Would you spend the holidays with Grandma and Grandpa at all? Would you ever come back?
Oh yes.
Tell me about holidays.
Well, holidays, we would usually, we lived a mile west until my grandmother moved to Cherokee. I would guess she moved to Cherokee, I don't know, shortly after Granddad died in 53 or 4. And, but before that, we spent most of the holidays over here.
Big family gatherings?
Yes, at that time, Dad's sister and my cousins, the Lookable boys, lived in Oklahoma City, and they would usually come up on holidays. Be family gatherings, yes.
Any food that you remember that you really enjoyed?
Rhubarb pie.
Really?
Yeah. Grandma baked rhubarb pie, and my wife won't bake rhubarb pie, so.
Connie, you won't make him a pie?
No, not a rhubarb. I'll make him a cherry or an apple pie or a soft pie, cream pie.
But Grandma made rhubarb pies. So.
And since y'all were actively farming, was it a time that you would take off, or would you still have to farm and tend to everything, or?
You mean for the holidays?
Mm-hmm.
Well, cattle still had to be taken care of, and usually we didn't observe many holidays in the summertime, Thanksgiving and Christmas, and in the winter when we weren't so busy.
And your high school was in Jet?
Yes, I went to graduate from Jet.
Okay. And how would you get to school?
How would I get to school? Well, I rode the big yellow bus till I was in high school, and then played football and played football all 4 years when I was in college. And the first year, for 27 cents, I could ride the Trailways bus from Jet to, and he'd let me off out, at home. And it cost me 27 cents to ride I think it was called Trailways, the bus that get on at Porgy's Cafe, and it just happened to come through about the time football practice was over. I did that when I was a freshman, and then before my sophomore year, I wasn't quite 16 yet, but I bought a car and took a chance and drove it to school and drove it home. So never did get caught.
And we have a car in the garage like his first car.
Yeah, I've got a car just like my first car, a 1950 Ford Crestliner. And if I happened to miss a bus, I'd hitchhike home. I never did have any trouble getting a ride if I'd missed the bus. With a letterman's jacket on and a bunch of books in my hand, the first car that came by, it stopped and picked me up.
Well, after high school, were you encouraged to go to college?
Yes, there wasn't any question about it. That's where I was going to go.
Mm-hmm. And how did you choose Oklahoma A&M?
Well, how did I choose that? I guess I just knew that that's where I wanted to go.
No, you wanted to go out to Oklahoma A&M.
Well,
Or out
I
to
got a football
Panhandle.
scholarship at Panhandle A&M, but I turned that down. I was offered a scholarship at Panhandle A&M, and I was offered one at Wichita State University, but I didn't want to go to either one of those places really. And so I went to, the coach and I went down to, it was Oklahoma A&M at that time, and talked to the coach down there, but I couldn't, they wouldn't give me a scholarship, so I went down there anyway. Didn't play football then.
And how did you choose your major?
How did I choose I like figures, and I like to work with figures, And I took the basic course in accounting, and I liked it, so I majored in accounting.
So tell me how you met Connie.
Well, we were high school sweethearts. I started dating probably about my junior year,
It's between my freshman and sophomore.
so something like that.
Well, at what point did your grandfather's farm come into your hands?
You mean when did I start to farm it, or when did I own it?
Both.
Well, I started to farm it when I was a freshman in high school, some of it,
Okay.
and didn't own it until we built this house here in 1970. And my father, at that time my grandfather was dead, and my father owned this farm and lived here. And, or didn't live, he lived in Cherokee at that time. We were still living here in the original house. And in 1970, my father said that he would give us the 40 acres here that the house sits on if I'd build a house and stay out on the farm. So he gave us 40 acres back then. And then we inherited the rest of this place when my mother died.
And what year would that be?
She died in 2006.
Okay.
She was 97.
So from the time you started farming this land, what changes did you make in terms of its operation, what you were growing?
Well, still grow wheat and grow some alfalfa, and mainly a wheat farmer. We have added 2 farms to what we've inherited. We bought Connie's brother and sister out on the farm that she grew up on, and so we own it. And then we bought another farm down to the northeast here, and then I inherited this farm and the one that I grew up on, and then I still farm. Of course, my sister got some of, not my sister, I didn't have a sister, but my dad's sister inherited, of course, some of my grandfather's land, and that belongs to my cousins now, and I still farm it.
Okay.
My cousins, one of them lives in Midland, Texas, and the other cousin that I farm for, he is deceased, and it's in a trust. And but I still farm the ground that my grandfolks had that my dad's sister got.
So let's talk about how farming has changed through the years. You've probably seen lots of changes from the time you were younger to today.
Yeah, but you know, I'm old and set in my ways, and I don't like change, and so I guess I haven't changed as much as a lot of farmers have. At least I don't farm with horses, though. No, I mean, back when I started to farm, nobody even heard of fertilizer. Of course, that's one change. And
Terraces.
terraces is another change, and terraces and waterways, and so that's some of the changes.
Cab tractors.
What's that?
Cab tractors and combines.
Yeah, cabs on the tractors and combines. I know Jeff, the first cab we put on a combine, he and the hired hand got in a fight over who was going to drive the combine with the cab on it, because only one of them had a cab.
Jeff gave him to understand it was his dad's, and he would be the one with the cab.
And he won the fight.
I'm sure cost of equipment has also changed through the years.
A whole bunch, yes. The only brand new tractor I ever owned was a 1958 John Deere 720, and if I remember right, it cost a little over $3,500. Now you can't buy a lawnmower for $3,500.
Mm-hmm. So how do you cope with the changes in the economics today? In terms, are you still running the older tractors, or?
Yes, my tractors are in the 90s. One's a 91, one's a 92 model tractor.
Being an accountant, we didn't buy anything if we couldn't pay for it. We did
That's
that.
kind of been, we've been in debt twice in our life. The first farm we added, went in debt to buy it, and got it paid off. Went in debt to build this house a little bit, got it paid, sold a bunch of cattle, and next year got it paid off. When the house was a year old, it was paid off. I've never, my theory has always been, if you can't pay for it, you haven't got any business buying it.
Your granddad.
I had the last pickup I bought, a 2011 pickup. The dealer made me finance some of it to get the rebates. You couldn't if you didn't finance it. So I told him, I said, my theory has always been, if you can't pay for it, you haven't got any business buying it. And he said, I'm glad that not many of my customers feel that way. And we had it paid for. We made one payment on it and then paid it off. And that way we got our rebate. So.
Has the government programs helped through the years?
Yes, sometimes I get irritated at the restrictions that are in it, but the money helped.
Mm-hmm. And how do you keep up with all of the programs out there?
Well, now the way you keep up with what's going on, I guess, is through the emails that they send out. And I like a lot better to get the updates in the mail, but that doesn't happen anymore. You have to get on the computer, and that's another change, I guess, is computers.
Well, being an accountant, you probably have an eye on the books.
Yes, I can get in the computer, and I can tell you, I've got every check that was written and every deposit that was written and all categorized out. Yeah.
How would your father keep track of farm expenses?
Probably didn't very well. It's probably my mother that did most of that.
Okay. And then today it's all computerized.
It's all computerized. Everything's in the computer. And the one computer that I had up to date, I've got our records in two computers, and one computer that's clear up to date, I think it crashed the day before yesterday. I can't get anything. I can't get anything but a black screen. So I'm hoping that that it can be recovered. We've called a computer guy, but he hasn't showed up yet.
Has there ever been times where the farm has not turned a profit?
Yes, in 1981 we got completely hailed out. I think I cut 2 truckloads of wheat off of all the farms, and so it didn't turn a profit last year. Probably won't turn a profit on this harvest this year. It's been the poorest harvest this year since 1981, and 1981 was because of a severe hailstorm.
And what are the causes for this year?
Dry weather. No rain.
And have you seen this type of weather in the past?
Yes, but this is about the worst that we saw last winter and spring.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, we're wet now, but that didn't do the wheat crop any good.
And how many acres are you farming today?
1,120.
Okay. And the original Centennial Farm was how many acres?
80.
80. Okay.
We own 680, and then my cousins own the difference between 1,120 and 680. We own 680.
Okay. So take me through a typical day on the farm.
Well, a typical day is I'm not an early riser. If I get outside by a little after 7, unless I'm baling hay, and I don't like those mornings, so I have to get up in the middle of the night and bale hay. But get up about 7 and go out and usually service. I usually have the tractor serviced up and make a few rounds before the hired hand ever gets here, and then I usually take care of the cattle and do odd things. if he's working, he hadn't worked now for about 3 weeks, so I have to do it all.
So you have one outside hired hand?
Yeah, part-time, yeah.
Okay.
Supposed to work pretty well full-time all summer, but he's supposed to be back tomorrow, but I hope he gets back tomorrow.
And how late do you go at night, typically?
Well, it depends on what we're doing. If we're in harvest, we try to get in the house by 11, and if we're just working ground, about dark.
Okay. And have you instituted any new practices, any type of hybrid seed or?
Well, we try to replace seed every once in a while. Bought seed a year ago, some new seed. No, it's 2 years ago. Bought some new seed, and the year before that, I bought some new seed to update the varieties.
He's not much for change.
I'm kind of set in my ways. I decided one year. I decided that I liked that old wheat the best, and there was still a neighbor. Back then, you could still buy wheat from a neighbor. You can't do it anymore. But he had some old Triumph wheat, and I thought, I'm going to get some of that and sow it. And I sowed that stuff, and it got up about over waist high and all went down flat on the ground. And it took us 2 days with 2 combines to cut 1/4, and that cured me of going back and getting the old seed.
How have your neighbors changed through the years?
The neighbors?
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's a lot of no-till farming,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't no-till anything. I don't really like to have neighbors that no-till because we get a hard rain, all that crop residue washes down. If you get water from above and all that straw and crop residue that runs off usually deposits, and then you have to burn those piles of straw and stuff, and it takes out fences when then the spraying is hard on the trees along the edges of the field.
The aerial spraying.
The drip. The aerial spraying has killed a lot of our trees, and neighbors aerial spraying in pastures. And I don't like to see all the dead in those trees. So. But that's the main change in neighbors farming is the no-till.
Mm-hmm. Have you considered it?
No.
I had to ask. I know you're not big on change.
Well, it takes a lot of new equipment
Mhm.
too.
Yeah. You have to have a no-till drill, and you have to, unless you hire all the spraying done, you have to have a big spray rig, and then I just don't like to mess with the chemicals.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Jeff,
Yes.
did you grow up on the farm?
Yes, I did.
So tell me a little bit about your early life growing up on the farm.
Well, it was a great upbringing. I mean, you can always tell when someone's grown up on the farm because they understand responsibility and know what needs to be done and takes it seriously. I was able to have, in the 4-H and the FFA, was able to have hog projects and had steers and sheep, and it was a responsibility that you needed to make sure you had time to take care of that, plus do all the fun stuff that you want to do as a young kid. And Dad's right. I mean, we would get up. I think when I was at home, we got up earlier than 7 o'clock, and we started before then. And we would work till dark, and dark was 9:30 in the summertime. And we did not have air conditioned cabs. It was nothing to come in the evening and just be covered with dirt, and you would sit on those tractors, and that hot air coming off the radiator just blow right back in your face, and the combines, you'd always want to head south, because then the chaff didn't come over the top of the combine and go down the back of your neck. So I remember one summer we had a hired hand that helped us, and he started cutting wheat at an angle, and it made Dad mad. He says, "What are you doing cutting at an angle?" He says, "Well, because that chaff either goes off at an angle this way or goes off at an angle this way." And he says, "I'm trying to keep it out of the back." He says, "No, we go round and around." So I'll never forget that. But
Didn't like change.
yeah, Dad did not like change. But then there was one summer when I went to my first year, went to NWOSU and played football over there, and I had a custom hay hauling business, and also tried to help on the farm, and I'll never forget the guys also that was helping me on the hay crew also helped in harvest. And I remember Dad coming up to me, and we were right outside here because we were finishing up, and Dad just came to me and he says, "Thank God harvest is over." Because these guys, well, the tractor, one of the guys was driving a tractor and it caught on fire, and he sat there and watched it burn. He got outside the tractor and sat there and watched it burn. And I don't know, there was several. Well, that same summer, the same guy drove the other tractor until it ran out of water and locked the engine up on it. So it was one of those deals that cost him a lot of money for me to have that custom hay hauling crew. So, but I went to Oklahoma State University. In fact, I didn't know there was another university in the state of Oklahoma. From a standpoint of, if you're going to go to a big college, you go to OSU. You know, didn't know that thing down in Norman existed. You know, but my wife and I both graduated from there, and if we could have figured a way out to make a living, we would have stayed there and lived, because it was just a wonderful place to be, and I guess it was the small city, but had big town amenities, and which we really liked, and then but the farm was a great place to grow up. It was. Mm-hmm. And then my oldest boy, he's going to be 30 this year. He enjoyed coming up and helping on the farm. And then I've got twin boys, and they could care less. So.
What was your major at OSU?
Agriculture.
So you planned to farm, or?
No. When I graduated, my wife, Dad was in the horse business, and so we trained horses and quarter horses, and then after that, I got in the golf business and was a green superintendent. And as Dad always said, he says that I was a glorified farmer with miniature equipment. And he always said, "Well, you're lucky because you don't have to produce a crop." And I said, "No, that's wrong. I produce a crop every day, because it's something that I always said." I said, "You know, you never knew what the next day brought, because if you showed up and you had a green or two dead, you were probably looking for another job." So, but I was in the golf business as a green superintendent for 17 years. And my success in that business came from my farming background. Understood, you know, what needed to be done, and working on equipment, taking care of equipment, spraying, fertilizing, that sort of thing. It was all, you know, second nature. And the first golf course that I worked on, I worked as had a landscaping company. And we worked as a contractor, and they asked us to go and if we would seed a green. We said, "Sure, we'll seed a green." We seeded that green, and we had it up in 7 days and was mowing it in 10. And that's when the general partner came to me and asked me if I wanted to be their green superintendent. I said, listen, I don't know anything about golf. I said, the only thing I know how to do is grow grass. He says, that's what we need. We need somebody that knows how to grow grass and maintain it, take care of it. So, and Dad, I'll never forget when it was Thanksgiving, my sister lived in Houston at the time, and or still lives in Houston, and we were going down there for Thanksgiving, and we were riding down with my mom and dad, and my wife and I and son, and Dad says, you don't know anything about golf. You have got over your head. And I said, yeah, and by the time I got back, he had convinced me that I was going the wrong direction, that I did not know anything about golf. And so I called the general partner and told him that I was bringing the company truck back, and I left the keys in it, and I was done. General partner said, you're going to go right back to that maintenance barn. You're going to meet me and pick your keys up in your truck, because he says, I'm not going to take no for an answer. And I owe a lot to that gentleman for giving me the opportunity, because it was a great career for 17 years. But now I'm in the house building business now, so, or the construction business. So.
Jerry, would you have a lot of interactions with extension agents?
Some, not a whole lot. Of course, now to buy any chemicals, you have to have the chemical license, and I've got that through extension education. Went to a class on it through the extension, and I've had soil tests run through the extension, and hay grazer hay tested for nitrates through the extension, and so used them some.
Okay. Were your mother or your grandmother a member of a homemaker club?
No. My mother was too busy dressing chickens and canning stuff and helping Dad and to have time for that.
But her church was very important.
Yeah, her church was her thing away from the farm.
Connie,
Yes.
you've been involved with extension quite
Yes.
a bit. Why don't you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, my introduction to it was I joined 4-H when I was in the 6th grade. And so it was just a continuation of 4-H for me in a way, because I was a 4-H member through high school. And when we moved back to the farm, one of the first things I did was join an OHCE group. And I can remember the first meeting I went to, the lesson was on how to iron a man a shirt. I never will forget that. And and I have served on the state level as chaplain and cultural enrichment and I can't remember what else, but it's been a big part of my life. And I like the competition at the fairs, and I appreciate I feel like it's been a continuing education for me. I only got 2 years of college, which was nobody's fault but my own. But I've enjoyed the lessons, and I gained a lot of knowledge from them. I know one of the things that I can remember is we had a lesson on accidents, and got a telephone call from my niece, and I had put on some grease to burn, or to heat, and I got so interested in the telephone call, I forgot about the grease on the stove, and I turned around and I had a fire. And I remember from one of the lessons to smother it. And I found a lid. I had a hard time trying to find a lid that fit the skillet, but I finally did and got it put out. Or I'd have had a real big mess. I went to school at OSU, and one of the classes I took was in home and interior design, and I drew the house plans for our house, and so that paid for my whole education that I got at OSU. And and Jerry and I have been married for 57 years, and it's not all been easy, but we made it, raised 2 kids we're very proud of, and wish we could have seen the growth of our 5 grandsons, but very proud of them and the lives that they're leading. So.
In the homemaker business, did you quilt?
Yes, I've got a lot of, the last 2 years I have had enough quilts to give each one of the grandsons a quilt. And the first Christmas, I never will forget, we put all the numbers in a hat and the boys drew them out, and the first one got his choice and the second one so, and 2 of the boys got in an argument over to which quilt they were getting. And he looked at the other one and he said, "Don't be surprised you don't find your tires slit in the morning." But in fact, I'm working on 2 quilts right now for our kids that are OSU quilts. And I did them stack and whack. I don't know if you're acquainted with that or not. I'll have to go get it and show it to you in a little bit. But both of my grandmothers, my grandmother Richardson and my grandmother Shackley, both were quilters. And so it's kind of followed along in the family. My daughter probably makes more than I do. And
Did you sew the children's clothes when they were younger?
yes, in fact, my daughter-in-law still makes fun of one of the suits I made for Jeffrey. But one of his 8th grade, wasn't it 8th grade?
8th grade graduation suit.
Yeah, I made for him. And we've got a picture of him in a black velvet coat that I tailored for him. And I learned it all through 4-H.
Those skills you don't learn anymore.
No, I know
Sure
they don't. No. In fact, I'm teaching the little neighbor girl to sew. And she went on vacation, so we haven't been able to do very much lately, but she'll come back over. And I've worked with 4-H kids through meat identification and sewing and what have you. And then since I didn't get to see my grandkids grow up very much, I go to the school twice a week during the school term and listen to the first graders do a one-on-one, and they read to me. And I've really enjoyed that. I think one of the cutest stories was a little boy came in. I like to talk. And he had no SU shirt on. I said, "Oh, you're my kind of man." I said, "I'm a Cowboy fan too." But I said, when I went to school there, I said it was called Oklahoma A&M College. He kind of looked me over and he said, "Yeah, you look old." But the teacher sends in words for me, and I go through the words with them, and then they usually bring in a book and read each one and read to me, and it's just a one-on-one, and I've really enjoyed it.
When did electricity come to the farm?
1943.
And were there any, at that point, big purchases made?
Light bulbs. Well, the first thing we got, if I remember right, was a refrigerator, and we probably had electricity almost a year before we got a refrigerator. But we got electricity just a few days before Christmas in 1943, and on the Christmas tree we had one string of lights that had 7 lights on it. I can still remember that. And we thought that was just really great.
Did you listen to the radio as a family?
Yes, I always listened to the Grand Ole Opry on Saturday nights, and Dad would always make sure the battery was charged up in the radio. That was before the electricity, before Saturday night. And And now my granddad folks had electricity over here earlier. They had a carbide system, and then they had some kind of an old generator that was out in that building out there that, and that old house had what you call knob and spool wiring in it, and so they had electricity over here a little bit before we did. But Dad was kind of like I, because he didn't know whether, he wasn't much for change, and this electricity was something new, and the line was by there, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 years before we hooked onto it.
In fact, the little house back behind, when we moved here, it was divided into 2 rooms, and the back room still had a wood cooking stove in it. We've kind of been sorry we let it go, but at the time, you know.
At the time it was junk, now
Yeah.
it's an antique.
And at what point did the house over here have indoor plumbing?
1952,
Okay. And so it had an outhouse.
yeah,
1-seater, 2-seater,
2-seater.
2-seater. Okay.
Montgomery Warder.
Yeah.
Yeah, but my grandfolks put that in over here not very long before Granddad died.
And the bathroom had an outside door. It didn't have a window. It had an outside door.
So of the old structures, what still exists on the property today?
The red barn and this building behind the house that, and the little garage over to the south of the house, and then there's one granary that don't use it for granary anymore. That was the kids' hog barn. We changed it into that. So there's that and the windmill and then the cellar that my granddad built, or what's left of the buildings that were on the farm.
In the early days, what did they use for fencing?
For fence?
For fence.
Well, and of course there wasn't electric fence, but my granddad eventually took up a lot of it was the old woven wire fences, and he took up a lot of that. I can remember, and so now the only thing we really got permanent fences around are the grass pastures.
What did he use for posts?
Used Bodark, and I hated those things because you couldn't drive a staple in them, and they were hard and hedge tree posts.
He grew those, or
You know, cut them out of hedge trees. I was sure glad to get rid of them. They'd last forever though was the problem, because they were hard but they wouldn't hold. I mean, you couldn't drive a staple in them.
and where would you take your product to market?
Jet.
Grain elevators and Jet.
Yes, Jet. We haul wheat to Jet, and my granddad used to haul wheat to Ewed, which that's not in existence anymore as far as the elevator. I think the old elevators may be still standing there, but they don't buy wheat or anything anymore.
But he didn't sell it to the co-op.
No, hauled it to Jet, and the Fuquay had an elevator there, and so hauled some of it there to Jet, which that elevator's not there anymore. The co-op elevator, of course, the elevator there now.
And did the train, was there a train that came close to the property or across it, or?
Not any. The train went across the salt plains up here. The nearest train track to our property would have been probably, as the crow flies, probably a mile and a half, 2 miles.
Any hobos come through?
Yes. a lot of hobos. I know when I was a kid, my mother never would let them come in the house, but she'd fix them a sandwich and they could sit on the front porch and eat it. Back in, I can still remember it. I was probably 5 years old, and it was during the war, when of course you couldn't buy a car, and a guy came in. We lived, I'm talking about when I was a kid, we lived a mile west on that farm, and a guy came in and said he was thirsty, he wanted a drink of water. So of course we had to pump it, the water, and pumped him a drink of water. And then he said he had a flat tire and he wanted to borrow a jack. So Dad was out in the field, and Mom and I went down to at that time we had practically a new car. We had a 1940 Ford, and Mom was leaned over to the trunk trying to get the jack out of the trunk, and he pulled a gun out and said, "Never mind the jack, I'll take the car." And I guess I was jumping up and down and screaming, and cars were driving by the highway, and he finally got scared and said, "Well, if you don't tell anybody," he said, "I'll just leave." And so he put his gun up and left, and then of course Mom went out in the field and called Dad in, and they called the sheriff, and the sheriff came out and looked around and decided he was gone. And so but she said she wasn't going to give him the keys, that she was going to throw him out in the weeds if he she was going to give him the keys. But he kept pointing that gun at us, and I can remember it. I was scared to death. But the hobos had come by too. But he wasn't a hobo, I don't know. He was just a thief, I guess.
Would there be traveling salesmen come through, like the Raleigh Man or Watkins, whatever there was in Oklahoma?
Well, I don't remember the Raleigh Man, but of course, when I was a kid, before we got electricity, we had a old ice box. You've got it now, that you put a big 50-pound cube of ice in the top of it, and the Iceman would come by and deliver the ice. And it was a 50-pound cube, usually about yay big, that fit in the top of that. And then you put if you wanted something real cold, you'd lay it on the ice up on top, and if you wanted the rest of the stuff went down below, which was cool from the block of ice up above. But I remember the Iceman coming around. That's about the only person that I can remember, coming around.
And if you wanted ice cream?
If you wanted ice cream, you didn't, until we got an electric refrigerator, we didn't have ice cream, except when you go to town.
And then your mother made it in an ice tray.
Yeah, after we got that first refrigerator, it was a Montgomery & Ward refrigerator. It came in on the freight train, ordered it out of the Montgomery & Ward catalog, came in on the freight train in Cherokee, and at that time Dad had a Model T trailer made out of a Model T frame, and I can remember we went to town and got that elevator got the ice box at the depot in Cherokee and put it in that Model T trailer and pulled it with the car and brought it home.
You live really close to the Great Salt Plains.
Yes.
Have you ever, growing up, did you ever go over there?
Oh
or?
yeah, I'd go up there and ride my bicycle around on the plains all the time.
Well, looking into the future, what do you hope to see happen in the next 100 years to the farm?
Next 100 years?
Yep.
Well, I'll be way beyond my time. I don't know. I've told Jeff, I said, I'll quit today and you can take over tomorrow. But that hadn't happened, and I don't see it happening, I guess. So I don't know what they'll do with it when I can't do it anymore.
What do you hope happens to it?
Well, I hope they at least, when it's theirs, they can do with it what they want to. What I'd hope would happen is one of them would come and live and farm it.
When do you anticipate to retire yourself?
Connie anticipates right now. As long as I can keep the hired hand that I've got and I'm able to get around, I intend to farm. And when I can't get around or I lose my hired hand, can't find another one that's, right now he's working for a friend that's a carpenter that needed some help on a job, and he's been gone for about 3 weeks, and like I say, he's supposed to be back tomorrow, but if they get that job done. But he's a good hired hand. He's worked for me off and on for years, and he's, I don't know how old he is. He's probably in his early 30s, and he knows how to do everything. I mean, I can just turn him loose and he can do whatever needs to be done. As long as I can keep him, well, I can handle it. Are we ready to go here again?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I can remember that we had a 40-20 tractor. I'm talking about when Jeff was probably in the grade schools yet, and we had a G705 Moline tractor, and everybody at that time was beginning to kind of get cabs on tractors, and something happened to the Moline. Jeff said, when are we going to get a tractor with a cab? And I said, well, when one of these blows up. Well, the M&M tractor, the bottom broke out and a push rod fell down and wrapped around the crankshaft, made a terrible noise, and Jeff was very hopeful. He said, did it blow up? And he was hoping that we would get a tractor with a cab. And it wasn't long after that till we put cabs on the tractors that we had, but not the Moline. We got rid of it.
I thought you was gonna tell about the tractor pull between him and your...
Oh, yeah. My dad, he'd usually come out in harvest, and he had an old ZM&M, which wasn't a very big tractor. And Jeff's job when he was just a little kid was to take, well, at that time we had an 80 John Deere, I believe. Mm-hmm. And it was a lot bigger than the ZM&M. And his job, it was muddy that harvest, and his job, Jeff's job, he was probably back in grade school, was to, when a combine got stuck, was to bring the tractor and pull us out. Well, I looked up, and there they had tied the two tractors together with a chain. And Jeff was on the John Deere, and Dad was on that little ZM&M, and Jeff was dragging that ZM&M backwards. And my dad said, well, you jumped and got the clutch in before I had a chance to get my clutch in.
All right, Jeff, you're up.
Oh, there was several just there was several. I guess probably the one thing that I remember, and it's just really a memory. I had gotten in trouble, and I was dating my wife, and I stayed in trouble most of my life. But I was dating my wife, and it was my birthday, and I was grounded, and I wasn't able to go. Mom went and picked my wife up, brought her over, and I remember her sitting on the pickup, and I was unloading hog feed into the self feeder, and it was dark, and we had the cargo light on in the pickup, and we'd have the feed ground at the jet co-op, and then we'd bring it back and unload it. And I'm get it all scooped out, and I'm getting the broom out and starting to sweep it off the inside of the bed and clean it all up. And my wife Elena, she looks at me and she says, "What are you doing?" She says, "You can just go down the road at 50 miles an hour and it'll all blow out." And I said, "No, I get in trouble." I said, "I'm already in trouble. You sweep it out, you get every bit, and you put it in there. You put it in the self feeder. You don't let it go to waste." But I guess to that point was, I'll never forget, as I started these projects as FFA and 4-H, we had, and this is before computers, we had spreadsheets that were this long, and this tall, you know, and we had everything, you know. Dad says, you need to write down everything you spent, everything you make. And we had those spreadsheets, and I'll never forget those long spreadsheets that we had with everything. But we never wasted anything. Everything was always, yeah, she just could not believe it that we wouldn't just go down the road and let it blow out. Because it wasn't much, it was probably maybe a scoopful, but no, we had to get it all.
All right, Connie.
Well, I was trying to think of something about Penny. Maybe a couple of things. One of them was growing up on the farm. Jerry took the kids a lot with him, and I remember they were in, I think, a red pickup, and they were going down the road, and they had, of course, Penny always loved the cats, and I remember that Jeff asked her, he said, well, have you got a boy or a girl cat? And Penny picks up the tail and says, well, it was one or the other. And Jerry said, I know she don't know what she's looking for. Do you remember that, Jeff?
Yeah.
And then the other thing is, Penny was, I guess, pretty well kind of bossy. Jeff thought so anyway. And when, there's 2 years difference in them. And when she went off to school, she started to school when she was in the first grade, and he went to kindergarten. And he came in and he said, Mama, how do I play it? And what do I play? Because she had always made the rules. And so one time, Jerry, it was wheat sowing time, Jerry said, I'm going to need some help moving, because he was working down on the far half section here. And I kept listening. It was warm and the door was open, and I kept listening for him. Pretty soon I heard the tractor coming, and I thought, well, he didn't come and get me to help him move. Wonder how come. Of course, Jeff was with him. And, you know, we have a pretty steep driveway there. And I saw the pickup drive up the driveway, and then all of a sudden it went rolling backwards. Well, Jeff he wasn't even in school yet, and Jerry had put him in the pickup and put it in low gear, and he let him drive it from the mile line up here. But he couldn't reach the foot pedals, so he didn't have enough gas to get up the hill. So it died on him and rolled back. But, and another time, Jerry came in one time and Jeff said, Mama, I drove the tractor all by myself. And I said, yeah, I know, Jeff. Because I knew when he went with Jerry, he'd put him between his legs and let him drive the tractor. He said, Mother, I did. I drove the tractor all by myself. And I said, yes, Jeff, I know. He said, Mama, Daddy was on the other tractor and I was by myself. And I thought, oh my gosh. But, you know, on the farm, the kids do things because they watch and they observe. And Penny did the cooking, you know, during harvest, and I hauled wheat. And so it was a wonderful place to raise our kids. And I wouldn't have had it any other way.
Team effort.
We've been, as I said, we've been married for 57 years, and I'm real proud of that.
What's your favorite time on the farm? You know, season-wise or time of day?
Christmas, when the kids all come home. And we've got our traditions. One of the things that they do is Jeff's wife and Penny started having a treasure hunt. And when the boys were small, well, it was more like a scavenger hunt.
Scavenger hunt.
Yeah, scavenger hunt. Well, you know, they just go to different places here in the house, and then finally they ventured outside. And now that they're grown, we send them to Cherokee, we send them to Jet, to the cemeteries, and they have a wonderful time. But even though he said his son's the oldest, 30 years old, they still want that scavenger hunt. And then a new tradition that they've just started the last few years is Penny bakes sugar cookies, and and gets all this frosting, and they decorate cookies, and then Grandpa can't watch. He has to come in and be the judge. But those are some of the things, and we got a great grandson too. We're real proud of him. we just can't get a girl. I said, I like to sew, and I said I just have to put the ruffles on the curtains because we're going to get a granddaughter from one on. So.
Well, is there anything else any one of you would like to add before we sign off for today?
Well, I guess not.
I might tell you that Jerry, like he said, he likes numbers. And I can remember going over to the Mabee Center at Oral Roberts University. And we hadn't been there very long until he told me how many ceiling tiles there was in the building. And I've heard that's kind of a phobia, that people count things, and Jerry does.
You can't go into any arena anywhere with him that he hadn't figured out how many seats are in it, because he's already calculated and estimated how many. It's amazing.
Well, all you gotta do is count how many is in a row and then count the rows. And work that out.
Yeah, but
You picked a good career.
yeah, he did. He did.
But he drove back and forth to Alva for almost 48 years. He started out in Cherokee, and then the lawyer that he worked for said he was going to move his practice to Alva, and he would pay his mileage if he would go with him, and so he did. And so he spent the rest of the time for a law firm called Morford and Benson, which were very good to us, very good.
Do you have a ballpark figure on how many trips around the field you've made in your lifetime then?
I would have no idea.
Okay.
Like I say, I put out my first wheat crop in the fall of '51 and harvested in '52. So.
You can figure on it tonight and let us know.
Okay.
Well, one thing that I can tell that he has passed on to both myself and my oldest boy is you don't have to buy new. He's in my oldest boy's in the construction business too, and we'll go find a really good deal on a piece of equipment. It may need some work on it, but we both are very mechanically oriented and understand it and get it, and so we're able to buy used and fix it up where it's in very good shape, and kind of learned that because he was talking about that M&M tractor that broke down. He really broke my heart because we pulled it in the shop and we started working on it ourselves, and I was planning on having that tractor with a cab on it, but we were getting ready to fix it. But we did. We would fix. A lot of farmers will take their combines to the dealership and have them prep it for harvest, and no, not us. We did it right here.
Didn't you and Daddy completely tear down a little Ford tractor?
Oh yeah, we took it totally down and redid it, but yeah, we did our own welding and a lot of our own mechanic work and that sort of thing, and it has proven very valuable in my career and in my son's career too. So, but one of the twins, one of them's pre-med and the other one is an accounting major, and then wants to go to OU and get a law degree. And I can't believe I just said that. So.
You gotta do what you gotta do.
Well, the best part about it is he's also talking about Oklahoma City University, which I'm very pleased. That would be okay too.
Anything else?
Well, Jerry's mother was very influential on his life, very much so, and on all of our lives, really. And she lived to be 97.
Yeah.
And she did without a lot in order for us to have what we have. So.
Her church was about all the social life she really ever had.
Yeah.
And then her church ran a second-hand store in Cherokee, and that was the highlight of her life when it was her time to work in it.
I think the funniest story on it was, of course, Jerry wore a suit and tie 7 days a week, you know, with church too. And he gathered up a bunch of his ties one day and took them up to the thrift shop. And when he always stopped when he come back from Alva working, and he stopped and she said, you know, somebody brought in a lot of ties today. And she said, this one just looked like you, so I bought it, and it's here, you can have it. And it was what he said, I just took it in there this morning. But if she wanted to give us something, a lot of times, she would put it in the bottom of a sack and then put something on top, because Dad LaGrow didn't always like for her to give us things. And so she had to do a lot of things in secret. And what, all 5 of the grandsons got to meet her. Remember?
97, that's a long,
Yeah.
did you have a secret to her longevity?
I don't know, she worked hard all of her life.
Yeah.
Had
She
her,
two-
had her parents lived longer?
No, her dad died when I was just a real small kid, and my memories of him are very faint. And her mother would probably have been in her 80s someplace, probably early 80s when she died, but her dad was probably, I doubt if he was even 60.
I don't know. I think she was still in her, well, it was either late 80s or early 90s. She could still bend at the waist and put her hands flat on the floor.
Yeah.
Wow.
I figured she was failing when she stopped changing oil in her own car.
Just a
And
very
that was
strong
That was
woman.
probably 80 years old.
Yeah. She was a very independent, strong woman. I mean, she was amazing. She
had a bed that was too tall, and so she took it outside and took a hacksaw to it.
cut the legs off of it. There was, I mean, if she needed something done, she wouldn't ask anybody. She'd just go get it done herself. Yeah, and I've got 2 of them. In fact, I was not very nice to my sister. I've got both her cast iron skillets, and you won't get them from me either. It fries the bacon up just perfect. So.
I know after she passed away, and the kids got here, well, we went up to the house. We told both of them they could have anything in the house that they wanted right now. And Jeff said he wanted the cast iron skillet, and we looked and looked and couldn't find it. Finally, Jeff said, you know, Grandma always kept that in the oven. Opened it up, and there it was. And so then we asked Penny, and she said, well, I want that bird that's up there in that window. And I said, Penny, it's broke. She said, I know. She said, every time I broke it, Grandma said, it's all right, we'll just glue it back together. So she only had 2 grandkids, but she treated them very well. And I know one of the questions that asked about was money, you know, how they took care of it. And Jerry, tell about your grandpa, what he did with money.
I can remember when I was just a little kid out behind this building that's behind the house, that he put money in a jar and take it out there and bury it. And I assume that it all got dug up, because I haven't found any of it.
Did he trust banks at all?
Well, some, but he always had some buried.
Mm-hmm. Have you continued the tradition?
No.
I figured your son would want to know.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that'd be good.
No, I haven't continued that tradition.
That's something you can add to your scavenger hunt.
Yes.
That's right. Absolutely.
Knowing those 5 boys that dig up the whole yard.
Oh yeah, it would be dug up.
In fact, we have a family reunion every Saturday before Easter, and the oldest boy And all of them still participate in the Easter egg hunt. Because Aunt Penny puts Sonic cards in them.
Yes, yeah, Sonic gift cards. Yeah.
We don't get together very often, but when we do, we have a wonderful time. In fact, they came out, what was it, about 2 years ago, and did an article on our barn quilts that we have. And Jerry and I argued over as to where we were going to put them. He wanted to put them on the front of the barn, and I said, nobody lives on past us. I said, nobody's ever going to see those. And so I made him put them on the north side of the barn. So we've got 2 barn quilts. And we got some pictures together if you want to look at some of
Great.
them.
Well, is there anything else before we wrap up?
No.
All right. Well, what we'll do is we'll sign her off and we'll look at your photos. And thank you so much for taking time out to talk with us today.
We appreciate you coming.
Thank you.